I'm Alexis, the traveling tiny houser, advocate, documentary filmmaker, and of course, one half of Tiny House Expedition. Welcome to my tiny home and my temporary co-housing community. Does that kind of community sound strange? Well, many others would definitely think so. It's an alternative lifestyle community of sorts, but fortunately, the neighbors don't seem to mind. Let's take a look at how to craft community, specifically a tiny living community in our NIMBY world. But first, let's go inside. One of my favorite things about living tiny is how it more intimately connects me to the outdoors. And that would be with nature or with... And yes, I do want neighbors. I know there are many enthusiasts out there who envision their tiny on a beautiful remote piece of property with no one in sight. And by all means, if that makes you happy, go for it. We certainly enjoy getting away from it all from time to time, especially with our cozy tiny in tow. But for access to resources and even jobs, living closer to others or town is definitely beneficial. Christian and I, like many others, are social beings and really thrive on living near people. But let's take a step back. What is a tiny home community anyway? Well, there's no hard and fast definition, but a community itself is defined as a group of people who live together or have a common characteristic. So simply put, the tiny house community at large has the shared characteristic of wanting to live tiny. And a tiny house community development is a group of tiny houses. And from my perspective, a tiny home community could have a mixture of different kinds of small dwellings or a mix of small and traditional homes. Why create this kind of community development? Well, it can lead to greater social interaction between neighbors, which can lead to more meaningful relationships, healthier lifestyles. It's also a pathway for creating more sustainable housing. Plus, sharing land and resources just makes good sense. There are as many kinds of tiny home community concepts as you can imagine. The sky is really the limit, but legal obstacles and the opinions of your neighbors can definitely get in the way. NIMBY attitudes can be the ultimate roadblock between any kind of new or different development. What does NIMBY mean? Not in my backyard. It's someone who imposes anything they don't like being built near where they live. This could be a project in their neighborhood like a garbage dump or a homeless shelter. Even though it might serve the greater needs of the community, they don't want it because they see it as unsightly, dangerous, or can affect their property value. Sometimes NIMBYism can be positive, like locals banding together to prevent a truly destructive project being built too close to residential neighborhoods. But NIMBYism can just be flat out selfish, like opposing something that's going to block your view or something that will cause construction noise in your neighborhood. NIMBYism can and does affect the available housing supply. A NIMBY might say, I agree with the proposed zoning ordinance that will help create more affordable housing, but I don't want poor people housing too close to my house. Poor people housing may seem a bit harsh, but government-assisted or even very small homes can be seen as a threat to someone's property value or neighborhood character. Here's a bit of food for thought for you. What if Americans stop thinking of their home as a financial investment? Let's take a look at the results of harsh NIMBY feedback on one tiny home community. Community First Village is a tiny house and RV community for formerly homeless. Their first location inside the Austin city limits was initially approved by the city, but the approval was pulled after major NIMBY pushback. Think loud and angry criticism. Many months later, after the opening of their new location outside of city limits, many critical neighbors are now strong supporters, and the founder was named Austinite of the Year. No matter where you want to live with your tiny home, in a community or as an accessory dwelling unit, having the blessing of your neighbors is critical. And that's just the hard truth. The destructive history of NIMBYism has led to something new, YIMBY. YIMBY, or Yes in My Backyard, is a forward-thinking, pro-housing development movement led by local advocates seeking to create more housing to lower the cost of housing for all. Think more supply, less demand. This can mean embracing higher density neighborhoods or even non-traditional housing developments. One of my favorite YIMBY terms is THIMBY, or Tiny House in My Backyard. It implies warmly embracing tiny houses as a housing option in your local community. Options that are affordable by design. If there's one thing I've learned from traveling cross country, it's that affordable and attainable housing options are desperately needed in a growing number of communities. You can activate a pro-THIMBY attitude in your town through local advocacy and community education. Here's a few ideas. Start or join a local tiny house enthusiast or advocacy group. Hold educational community events and encourage your local city to embrace tiny house friendly zoning. Oh, and don't forget to watch and share our educational documentary, Living Tiny Legally. THIMBY is also the name of a tiny house project by a team of UC Berkeley students that work together to design and build an affordable off-grid tiny home. The idea behind this house is to serve as a residence for an on-site park caretaker. The young caretaker would help keep the park clean and safe for local residents, and raise awareness for the park's environmental education programs, and help UC Berkeley collect research. This is such a great community building opportunity, and it's all through aesthetically pleasing, low-impact housing for park caretaker. I really hope this project comes to fruition. Look at it. Now let's take a closer look at existing tiny home communities across the country. These are all delightfully diverse in concept, structure, residents, costs, legal status. But the one thing they all have in common is the size of the houses, of course. A real classic tiny home community model is the RV park. And Orlando Lakefront at College Park is a tiny house and RV community in, you guessed it, Orlando, Florida. It's a growing community in a revitalized 1950s RV park. It's got a beautiful lake and a bird sanctuary, and it's home to many full-time RVers. It's one of the first RV parks in the country to transition to a tiny house park, and the owner sees this as an opportunity to transform his park into a more aesthetically pleasing and warm and friendly community environment. He doesn't want to show longtime residents the door anytime soon because these have been RVers in good standing. He does see this as a long-term opportunity to gradually grow and transform the park. It's home to 13 tiny houses, 11 on wheels and 2 on foundation, and there's even one available for short-term rental. The current tiny house residents are a diverse group. They range from early 20s to late 60s. They socialize together and help each other out. The park, of course, is zoned as an RV park, and the fees are for lot rent, but it includes utilities and Wi-Fi. As far as feedback from the community, it's basically, when can I visit? There have been many occasions where overzealous enthusiasts come into the community uninvited, peer into windows, knock on doors. So the community now does regular open houses, and the residents created a secret knock plus a texting system to make sure respectful boundaries are kept intact. Pros: it's move-in ready, it's tiny house friendly, you don't have to worry about a zoning complaint. The lots on the lake are beautiful and spacious, and it's located in a suburban setting with lots of shopping, and it's very close to an urban center. Cons: if you don't score a coveted spot on the lake, the lots are very small. Overall, the park is a bit rough around the edges. Wi-Fi is weak, but that's typical of most RV parks, so you might want to plan on your own. The hybrid RV tiny house community is really taken off, and these are starting to pop up all over the country. A few examples are Lemon Cove Village near Sequoia National Park, Riverview RV Park in Loveland, Colorado, the Village of Wildflowers in Flat Rock, North Carolina. Those are park models and tiny houses on wheels, actually. And then there's Park Delta Bay in Iselton, California, among others. Despite popular belief, there are numerous tiny house-friendly parks across the country that accept tiny houses for short or long-term stays, and we've personally never been turned down from an RV park. Now, the aesthetics, amenities, and lot rates can vary greatly, and it's important to note, depending on where it's located, your allowed length of stay can be from like 15 days to 365 days. But the reality is there are countless parks with long-term, full-time RVers. The first RV park we stayed at was well maintained, with lots of trees and an amazing saltwater pool. When we pulled in, we were immediately greeted by about a dozen residents, most of them full-timers. They all knew each other. They offered us help with our dysfunctional water heater. We were pretty much joking around right off the bat and really hit it off with a few of them. And one family invited us to dinner that night, and we gladly accepted. At dinner, we found out that that family had moved into an RV after they lost their house, but they found they really enjoyed living tiny. But the wife dreamed of having her own homier environment in her very own tiny house on wheels. RV parks can make a great home. I wouldn't write this off as an option for tiny house parking or even a community setting. Imagine the possibilities of transforming a dilapidated RV park into a tiny house community, or creating a new one by purchasing an RV-zoned piece of property. Someone who did imagine the possibilities was the innovative billionaire Tony Hsieh. He created Llama-lopolis, a tiny home and Airstream village in the heart of downtown Vegas. It's an intentional community, or a community designed and planned around a collective values and interests involving shared resources and responsibilities. In the fall of 2014, it was just another vacant, rundown lot in Vegas. And long ago, it had been an RV park, but was now completely in disrepair. Tony was looking for a new place to call home, and it just so happened Zappos owned about 33 tumbleweeds and Airstreams. An idea came to him to park all of these on the old RV park to conduct a community experiment. He invited 30 friends to stay for a couple weeks and to explore ideas on how to create a functioning, sustainable community. The empty lot was soon brought to life by this group of creative thinkers, and during their stay they would gather around the fire to cook, share ideas, and listen to music. They explored concepts for the optimal layout and discussed what amenities were most needed. Tony and several others were really loving this simple, connected lifestyle, and after just a couple of nights, they knew they wanted to stay for good. And this would become Tony's full-time residence. A vibrant and definitely unique urban tiny home community model has organically evolved to best meet the needs of its residents, while the structure of the community has been deliberately molded to foster daily, spontaneous social encounters. Tony calls these collisions. For instance, everyone comes through one main entrance. This increases the number of social interactions and strengthens the connected community vibe. The residents are working downtown professionals, artists, or digital nomads that work from home or travel heavily for work. There are full-time and part-time residents. There are singles, couples, and in the past even small families. We were surprised to learn that many of the residents are introverts. One resident, her name's Chrissy, she said that, left to her own tendencies, she would really seclude herself, but she recognized that wasn't particularly healthy. So living at Llama-lopolis gives her the opportunity to have all these spontaneous interactions with folks, but then she always has the ability to retreat to her cozy, own tiny home if she needs her personal space. The village is zoned as an RV park, and the rent includes the tiny home, utilities, shared facilities, and Wi-Fi. Okay, pros. It's within walking distance to everything, from jobs to groceries to restaurants. Shared facilities, we got laundry, indoor lounge and workspace, outdoor lounge space, kitchen with extra fridge space, which is perfect for all the community potluck leftovers. And the shared common areas really acts as an extension of the living space of each resident's tiny home, and all the homes face those spaces. High-speed internet throughout the whole village. Animals, it's completely pet and farm animal friendly. There's a point person, the community manager. He oversees all the maintenance. Though residents are encouraged to contribute regularly based on their skills and interests. Security. The entire community is enclosed by a 5-foot concrete wall. This helps maintain a sense of safety, also fosters a connected community feel within a busy downtown. There's lots of organic community building, like at impromptu potlucks. And there's events like the bi-monthly jam sessions with friends and family. Something we really liked about La Malapolis was how the air was often filled with music and smoke from the fire pits that were always going. This style and vibe is like very reminiscent of Burning Man, which is a festival based on community, art, and self-expression. And we found out it really made a lasting impression on many of the residents and really informed the design of the community. Okay, cons. You can't bring your own tiny home here, and unfortunately, no uninvited visitors, and you have to be recommended by a current or former resident to live here. Also, it's Vegas, so most of the year it's hot as hell, and the asphalt can get a bit sticky. La Malapolis is continually evolving, and they now have a goal of reaching net zero energy, which is pretty exciting. The shared resources there are really a wonderful community building tool, and the shared responsibilities as well, just because it helps to make everyone feel included and like they're part of something greater. And actually, that's a lot like Tony's reasons for living here. You know, for Tony, it's not about living small at all. In fact, this is the biggest house he's ever lived in a lot of ways, because he said his life is outside of his tiny home or his bedroom. And living in the community really makes him feel like he's part of something greater, like a more meaningful way of life. Feedback from the local community has been great. People love seeing value added to one of the many vacant lots in the area. Also, people want to live there. They're hoping more communities like this can be created. Now, feedback online has been a little bit different. On one of my posts about La Malapolis, someone asked, what's the difference between a trailer park and a tiny home community besides the stigma of being poor? Fair question. I think it really comes down to intent and quality. Of course, not all trailer parks or mobile home parks are poor quality or unattractive. But I think the big differences here are that people are choosing to live in tiny houses now that are on the whole built with quality materials. They are fairly affordable, as you know, maybe not as inexpensive as some traditional trailers, but they are very affordable. A tiny home community that's created from scratch might be a lot more aesthetically pleasing. I think people put more emphasis on that and sustainable features, you know, because living lightly on the earth is something that a lot of tiny housers really value. And then, but I think a big difference is I've heard a lot of stories and a lot of news stories about how a lot of trailer parks are really poorly managed and people get taken advantage. Their rent gets raised, people get trapped because mobile homes really aren't that mobile, and the upkeep's not great. Now, I've seen some really nice ones. So I think, you know, it all comes back down to that intention and quality. Can the La Malapolis community model be replicated? You bet. It takes finding some rundown, dilapidated, or for sale urban RV parks, startup capital, creative thinkers, and some motivated community members, and voila, you got an intentional tiny home community. Now, you've heard the saying, everything's bigger in Texas. Well, there's a few communities there who would beg to differ. The itty-bitty town of Spur, Texas is reinventing itself. And back in 2014, they declared themselves tiny house friendly. This is part of a grand plan to revitalize this dying small town. Tiny house pioneers are welcome to bring or build their tiny home and put it on a single lot in Spur. And the lots are super cheap and going quick. 70 have been sold so far, but there's still many more vacant lots or lots that have burned out houses on them. Inexpensive land is a real rarity, and here in Spur, there's no additional impact fees. And those are the two biggest obstacles for placing tiny houses on single lots or in community developments and other places in the country. And that's why developer Danny Schallenberg is looking at building a pocket neighborhood in Spur. With the population of only 1,000, it's plausible that the tiny housers could become a majority in the town of Spur. Most newcomers have been welcomed with open arms by longtime Spur residents. Others have been a bit skeptical. Can't really blame them. They've been born and bred in that town, and maybe just want to take a little extra time to get to know some of the residents. But tiny housers like Carol are really making inroads by joining the library board and getting involved in the community. The city has adopted building codes and zoning that are tiny house friendly. Let's talk pros. It's a lovely setting in a rural landscape, cheap land, no legal conflicts, lots of small business opportunities in the quaint, mostly vacant downtown, access to nature, non-existent crime, and fiber optic internet. Cons. It's a town in transition, so it's rough around the edges, but kind of in a charming way. Limited shopping and resources. The closest town is an hour away. Closest big town, Lubbock, is an hour away. And you'll need to remove the wheels of your tiny home to secure it to a foundation. There's a different kind of NIMBYism going on in Spur. Can't say that it's all bad. A few of the newcomers who came to town said they were going to build tiny houses, but really wanted to build earthen structures and started to make steps to do that. Well, this did not go over well, and this was not the kind of structures the town had in mind or put into their ordinances. So these few residents who were unsatisfied by the restrictions picked up their belongings and moved a few miles down the road to unrestricted county land and are now creating their own community called Makerton. The idea behind Makerton is to create an off-grid, co-op intentional community. So everyone who lives there is going to have ownership, and it's going to be made up of makers, pilots, and off-gridders. It's a pretty funky community plan, but they're making some steps to make that development a reality and to fix some of the sour ties with the Spur townspeople by doing all their shopping in town and trying to be really courteous and such. Okay, well, these aren't the only Texans making a tiny splash. Austin Live Work is one of the first tiny house on wheels communities across the whole country. It's located just outside of the Austin city limits on a piece of property with unrestricted zoning. And when we visited them, they had 13 tiny houses, but now have a whopping 25, including 4 rentals. This is an innovative development on a 10-acre piece of property that was created by entrepreneurs Matt and Marnie. They're hoping to become the future of private land development. This community is more like a startup than an intentional community. It has the startup state of mind, a culture and mentality of innovating existing ideas to solve critical pain points like unsustainable suburban sprawl and affordable housing problems. The community founders embrace libertarian ideals and want their residents to have maximum freedom to contribute to the community as they see fit and limited rules. They're hoping the community will become more self-sustaining and eventually fully off-grid. The community plan is completely flexible based off of available resources and ideas from the community members, including cottage business ideas. At Austin Live Work, they offer lot rentals, which include your utilities. Okay, let's talk pros. They offer a place for you to build your tiny house. The rules are very limited. The rental rates are very affordable, especially compared to the Austin market rate. There's startup incubator opportunities, barter and collaboration opportunities, aging in place, community building activities, a Hugh Newer system and gray water filtration system. Of course, you don't have to worry about zoning complaint. You have close access to an urban center and garden space. This could be seen as a pro or con, but you're right down the road from a major speedway. So lots of great events. Can be a little bit noisy, but not too bad. Let's talk cons. There's no tree cover, and we all know Texas summers can be brutal. Some of the residents have combated this by hanging shade covers, so that helps. But in general, the landscaping and community development is slow, and it's an ongoing process as funds are available and as community members contribute ideas. There's no internet, so you're going to have to provide your own. And there's no firm comprehensive development plan, which is important to some people. Regarding feedback from the neighbors, though, there aren't really any neighbors, so that's a plus. When people drive by, they often just stumble across the community, are really delighted, and will come in to learn more. So the community has set up tours. To get immersed in the community experience at Austin Live Work, you can join one of their tours or book a stay in one of their 4 tiny house rentals. Matt and Marnie are open to starting other communities. You can reach out to them to collaborate about creating a community on your piece of property, preferably unrestricted zoning. As nomadic tiny housers, Christian and I sometimes join or form temporary communities, like where we're parked now, in my sister's backyard. This is not your typical family visit. We've been here for over 2 months and have formed a kind of mini co-housing community. A co-housing community is semi-communal housing consisting of a cluster of private homes and a shared community space whose residents share in tasks such as childcare. We share her backyard space, meals, we contribute to the utility bills, and help with chores and childcare. We found the community experience really amplifies the benefits of tiny living on personal and greater community levels. Our greater tiny house community means connecting over the common ground of tiny houses, but it's so much more. The houses are just the beginning and a launchpad for a more connected, meaningful lifestyle. And a tiny home community just takes it to a whole nother level. To learn more and see inside of emerging tiny house communities across North America, and to learn more about tiny house friendly cities, and to follow our continuing adventures, subscribe to our YouTube channel, Tiny House Expedition. And to learn more about tiny house friendly towns, be sure to watch our educational documentary series called Living Tiny Legally. Thanks for stopping by. Punk. One more time.